Righto, it's 2024, and I'm excited. I'm pumped. It's not too far away, and I'm not talking about Super Rugby. I'm not talking about the All Blacks. We've put 2023 behind us. But the Northern Hemisphere, what do? They keep playing rugby, Sir John Kirwan, who's joining me in this preview of the 2024 Six Nations. So I've been on the golf course. You've been surfing. But bubbling away, the Northern Hemisphere is preparing itself for a Six Nations where they haven't delivered in a Rugby World Cup again. But it's the start of a new cycle. And there's a lot of players, JK, as we well know, after a Rugby World Cup, who all of a sudden have moved on. And it's maybe, in some sense of the word, the next generation. But first and foremost, are you ready for the start of 2024? And it's a hell of a weekend to start when you start talking about the Six Nations.
Well, actually, you can stop recording because it is actually nice to see you, so you don't have to record that. And the first thing I'm going to disagree with is, no, I'm not over 2023. I'm still not over the final because I just think it's so – it was just like, wow. I'm still not over it. Still can't believe we didn't win. Would have been an epic win. But I did say that it's the best second we will ever have. So we just need to take it and move on. I need to get over it. I think end of an era. And end of an era for us has been, I don't know if end of an era is Moanga, but maybe it's definitely Retallick. It's definitely Whitelock. It's definitely Smith. Probably not Kane. So we've got 4 or 5 of our best rugby players that we're used to seeing in the All Black jersey, not there anymore. But we have to wait till July. In the UK, around Six Nations, there is World Cup, and then it happens straight away. So coaches, and it was really interesting because I caught up with Warren Gatland, who was down over Christmas, and his probably started pre-World Cup, right? Because they went into this trough. But then you see the turmoil that England's going through, probably the most turmoil with finances, with guys, saying, actually, I'm looking at France. Actually, I'm sick of the pressure of playing for England and I'm going to go and not do that anymore. And when that comes from your captain, right, when that comes from Farrell, you got to start saying, wow, is it the game? Is it what do we need to do to actually make this game a little bit more user-friendly, both on the field and off the field? And again, this morning, another article from one of our top refs saying, we interpret this game, right? So, new era. I'm excited like you. I'm excited to see if rugby has the courage to change. And my initial response is no. I'm really interested to see what the Six Nations delivers. Is it going to be a poor standard because they've got a whole new range of people coming through? Is it going to be as successful? Probably in the public going to the games eyes, it'll be still the same. But is it going to be, is missing Farrell, is missing some of these players actually going to drop it off a wee bit online? So there's lots of stuff to talk about.
And that's where probably I want to start, because you talk about choices, and Antoine Dupont, arguably one of the best players in the world, and has chosen to play sevens, chase Olympic gold. So he's no longer part of this French outfit going into the Six Nations. Jonathan Sexton, no longer part of Ireland. You've just mentioned Owen Farrell, no longer part of England. Probably the 3 most influential players in probably the last 4 or 5 years of Six Nations rugby, if not longer, are now no longer part of this group. But in saying that, France remains that young, exciting, youthful group. They had to deal with that challenge through the Rugby World Cup. They lost Dupont through injury, and they almost got so very close to getting to the next stage. But for them, this outside of Rugby World Cup, the Six Nations is it, right? This is the, every year, they get to play 5 games under pressure, home and away. There's no second time round for games. And the first match is between the favourites. Again, you'd have to say Ireland away to France in the very, very first weekend. So you've got a competition which usually takes time to play out, but ultimately the 2 strongest squads are going to be in the first game. And how ready are they going to be? How much have they got over Sir John Kirwan what happened in 2023. How much of that's going to be a big part of their success in 2024 is the fact that they spent so long preparing, had so much belief. Both teams got so very, very close within one play each of making their way into a semi-final of Rugby World Cup. How much impact does that have? And do you see the opening weekend in some ways? Is it going to be the critical game for both these teams?
Yeah, it is. And there's a story within a story there, right? So when we lost the World Cup in 2007, one of the greatest things we did was retain the coaching staff because you get learnings from World Cup. So I think Fabien Gauthier is an amazing coach and done an amazing job, right? But he made a mistake in that semi-final because he should have subbed Dupont with 15 to go because he ran out of legs. They still could have won it, but they lost belief. So him staying on, he will learn from that. He will also have to survive without Dupont, right? Who is world class. He also doesn't have, his amazing standoff who he lost before the World Cup. So all those things, I think, for the first time ever, what normally happens with France is they clean the coach out, clean everyone out, boom. But I think they're building to an amazing next World Cup. I think Fabien will learn from the last World Cup. I think he'll analyse himself. I think a lot of these players, why doesn't Farrell want to play for England anymore? Why does Dupont want to go, to the Olympics? These are some of the questions you've got to ask. I think the Olympic question is an amazing one. And I was very critical of our Sevens team, when they invited All Blacks to go to the last Olympics, and obviously Caleb Clark was one, and then they didn't pick him. That was done. So no All Blacks going to put their hands up anymore. But if it was me, I would think, wow, Olympic gold, I'd like to do that, but like Sonny Bill did. So I understand Dupont. I think it's good for France because to win, you've got to be able to play without those guys. And then I think Ireland's a real interesting one. I think Ireland is, that you'll never get over that loss. You can say what you want. That loss against the All Blacks. And it just shows you that consistency of form and winning all the time is not the secret to World Cups. So what will they be looking for? I think they'll be looking to replace Sexton. I always thought the Irish team without Sexton was half the team because of his organisational skills, because of his ability tactically to kick. When you think about Richie Mwanga, when you think about Bowden Barrett, the amount of time that it takes those guys to actually understand the fast-moving, tactical, technical side of the game, and that's why I'm disappointed we've lost Richie because it took Sexton a long, long time. But what are they looking for in his replacement? Remember the discussion that we had about, Grant Fox, one of the greatest first fives we ever played with, and Frano Boddicker was around at that time, probably a different style of player. Then you probably had, Mertens, who was a little bit of a combination of both. And then you get Daniel Carter, who was like both of their sons, right? So he had the technical knowledge, but took him a long time. Took him a few sad losses. Took him a long time to get it. So I don't think you can just throw this new first five into the Irish team and think he's going to solve those problems.
I look at it in another way, though. I look at these two squads in particular, and ultimately the rest of it's still there, though, in terms of strength. I've looked at it now, and I've spent the last probably 4 or 5 days researching and looking at form and who's in health and who's doing what. And I look at France, and I think they're favourites. The one thing that's different for them is they're taking their home test matches around France, I think, because Stade de France is being prepared for the Olympics. And so, all of a sudden they're playing in Marseille their first game. So how does that change in terms of their influence, and does that in some ways help Ireland? Now, Ireland delivered on the biggest stage, but that was at home last year against France. And like you say, they've got something significant they need to get over in the disappointment of last year. But Crowley's the man, Jack Crowley's the man who's been given and looks as though he's going to be given the reins at 10 for them. But they've still got Gibson Park. They've still got Bundy Aki. They've still got world-class players on the outsides. You've still got James Lowe. You've got all of those things. Ringrose is still there. You've got all these guys, I think that give them so much stability. And ultimately, their forward pack is still intact. So everything is there for Ireland, But I look at France, and I still believe. I look at the French side, and I look at the way Ramos was world class at the end of the competition, the way that he was playing. Jalibert did a great job with Intermac being out, and he's going to be out for the Six Nations. Jalibert did an outstanding job at first five. Dante at second five, or Foucault in the midfield. Look, all of the things are there. Pinot's still there. Like, I look at that side. Aldrit at number 8. I just think there's too much for me, JK, to ignore them and say, you know what, I'm seeing them as favourites. But is it too early? Is it?
I agree for one reason. The hardest thing when you become All Black coach is you've got to win the World Cup, but you've also got to win the championship. You got to win the Bledisloe Cup. The trouble is with Ireland that the reason why I'm actually agreeing with you, which is rare, the reason I'm agreeing with you is age. Jamison Gibson Park and Bundy Aki, right? Are they going to make the next World Cup? Question mark. I hope for them. This is not a personal thing. I like both those people. But the reality is, you've got to win Six Nations to keep your job safe, to keep developing. But when you think about France, they're in a better place with the younger players, right? This is a very young French side, whereas a lot of the Irish side have been aging, right? Bundy Aki, how old is he now? 35?
Not quite that old, but he's in his 30s, like you say. But in saying that, no one's looking towards the next Rugby World Cup now, are they? Are they, or should they be?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the hard thing. I don't think France have to worry about that. But if you're Farrell, right, and you're going, okay, what is my job? If your job's secure, and he's secure there, right? He's a bit like Joe Smith. They love him. He's done a great job. No one's questioning his ability as a coach. So his job's probably safe. And he's going, okay, what hurt the most? If I could trade all my Six Nations tournaments to win that game against the All Blacks and win the World Cup, what would I do? And this is the dilemma. This is the dilemma, This is the dilemma that Ian Foster has. This is the dilemma that Razor Robinson's going to have in 3 years' time, right? So the dilemma, I think it's easier for France because they have a nucleus of a young side that would have felt the pain of that playoff, and they don't have to change too much. They've changed a little bit because DuPont's gone to the World Cup. They've changed a little bit because Intermac's injured. But Ireland, what are they going to do? Are you going to play Jamison Gibson Park for the first 3 games and then bring in the young guy? Are you going to play Bundy and then bring in, It's just, I just think it's a really interesting dilemma to have. Rebuild your side, win.
Yeah, you're right. And the other side of it too is that, like you say, France doesn't have a distraction per se of a Lions tour coming up in 12 months' time in Australia, 15 months' time in Australia. So all of a sudden, Six Nations becomes one of those gauges where all of a sudden you want to put yourself on the radar. So Irish players who have undoubtedly over the last 4 or 5 years have been the strongest squad, have been the team that's delivered. You would think that they would be the nucleus of a Lions team that's going to go on tour to Australia. But I just want to just go back and I've always said this about the Six Nations and the way the draw falls. So for France, they've got Ireland at home, then they've got Scotland away, they've got Italy at home, they've got Wales away, and then England at home. And so if you look at the strength of their schedule, 2 hardest games you would imagine are going to be Ireland and England. And they've got them both at home. So I think a significant advantage for them. Then the flip side of it, if you go to Ireland, they play France away. They've got Italy at home. Then they've got Wales away. They've got Wales at home. Then they've got England away and Scotland at home. So I look at it and go, their 2 toughest games are both away from home. So I think it's going to be a difficult proposition for Ireland. To go through and win those 2 games. And so I think every off year for them, the draw helps. Whereas this year, it certainly doesn't help given the strength of the squads. And with that, I'll shift my attention to England then. Right? Let's shift my attention to England. Here's a team that arguably should have made the Rugby World Cup final. They should have beaten South Africa. I mean, they're one decent play.
That is a ridiculous thing to say.
No, it's not, because they should have, because they were 1 play away from all of their fullback has to do is bang it long.
Fiji were robbed.
Well, I would say England were robbed. in the semi-final. And you and I know that we're pretty confident we would have beaten them in the final, but that's irrelevant. I love your irrelevancy call. And
Here's a question for you then. Do you think that was good for English rugby or bad for English rugby that they actually got that far?
regardless of how they did it and how they went about it, it was still good because ultimately you have to play to a style that's going to give you the best opportunity to win. And that's what they did. You would have to say,
our rules let you do that.
What's that?
Our rugby rules let you do that.
They let you have 7 forwards on the bench as well, JK. They let you do a lot of things, the laws. But ultimately what England did was they played to their strengths. They played to what they had. And they, like we saw what they did in their opening game against Argentina, and George Ford, kicked how many penalties, scored 20-odd points, off the boot to get them to a point where they're taking drop goals. And, they recognised and were adaptable enough to go, this is our type of Rugby World Cup. It rained in the semi-final. So all of a sudden they played and were within moments of going to a Rugby World Cup final. So ultimately, was it good for their rugby? I think so, because they had something that they believed they could fall back onto, which is what South Africa have done for how long?
Will they play like that in the Six Nations?
Should they play? My question to you is then, should they play like that? With no Owen Farrell, the new.
Okay, this is the two sides of my brain, right? This is my rugby, how I love this game, the philosophical side, right? The philosophical side of me goes, I am sick of world rugby. I'm sick of indecision. We need to change the rules. We need to take some size out of the forwards. We need to speed the game up. It needs to be an attacking focused game, blah, blah, blah. Philosophical side. So when I talk about England, I go, good on you. You played to the rules like South Africa did. You bored us to death, but it doesn't matter because you played to the rules. And as a purist, so the purist rugby guy goes, good on you. You played to your strengths, right? Will that frustrate some of the players nowadays? If you play on the wing for England, is that going to frustrate you? What sort of style do you want to play? Does that then change the people you pick, right? So for me, it's if Borthwick gets it wrong and some of these kids want to play footy, are they going to be able to stick to that game plan? Will it be enough to win against France? I don't think so. When they
are we still
South
on what side of your brain are we still on? Sorry, which side of your brain are we still on? Because you said, are we still on one side or have we moved to the other side?
Well, so go back to the philosophy side of my brain. I hope that France win by running the ball everywhere. I hope that Italy get an upset by playing rugby. I hope that Ireland play rugby and win it, right? So that's the philosopher, because I don't like that style of game. Yeah. You and I, we made comments after the World Cup and our South African cousins took it personally. It wasn't personal. I just don't like the way they play. Did they do the right thing? Right? Of course they did. It won them the World Cup. Good on you. I love it. But that gets me back to our rules let you play a certain game that can bore people to death. Now, are England going to bring that game? And this is not if you want to do it, that's cool. It's just not the game I like to watch, right? So there's sort of good and evil here in my head. I'm sort of hoping that those that take an attacking philosophy get to win the Six Nations, not a defensive philosophy. Guys on the bench, kick it down there, bore us to death, take you through. That was the 1970s, mate.
Yeah, but what we've seen there's no doubt there's an admiration for the way Ireland have structured their game, the fact they show so much great creativity. And when you say creativity, they make outstanding decisions under pressure to put people into space. And to me, that tactically is magnificent. And so we've had that respect. And look, I mean, France are an interesting proposition going by what you're talking about, because they kick the ball as much as anybody. But what they do is they're dangerous if you make a mistake against them. And they still have this ability of poor kicking games and off errors to all of a sudden turn into counter-attack, into winning and scoring tries from long range. And so there's enough there to suggest that they have the necessary skill set to play the game. And this is why I think in some ways when we talk about Scotland, if we move on and talk about them, Finn Russell plays a game that is unorthodox, which is creative, which is in a lot of cases, very much high risk and
Not,
sometimes is
but
low reward.
yeah, but not rewarded. So listen, Sir Bill Beaumont and John Jeffrey, just listen 1 second. As a professional coach, we kick the ball because you don't have the courage to change the law, right? Like Scotland attack, I love the way they attack, but they get punished, right? So all of a sudden, one of our best attackers, one of our artists of the game, um, his team's going to lose because he sees a gap and takes it and gets over the vantage line, and then the dumb bloody, laws that we have means that his coach is going to say to him, "Look, Finn, I saw you see the gap, bro, but kick it." So our laws make us kick it, right? So you can take that to the extreme. What France have done is they've found the right balance. What the All Blacks do is we find the right balance, I believe. Does it win us World Cups? Well, not lately.
What's wonderful about this, Sir John Kirwan, it's taken us 18 minutes into 2024 for you to call out Sir Bill Beaumont and John Jeffrey of World Rugby. And I'm not surprised because at the start of this, no. But what I'm saying is, at the start of this, you said you went over last year. You said you weren't ready, and that confirmed the fact. And you're right. I tend to agree with you. The fact that, look, I have the utmost respect for the competitors that England and South Africa are. And I'm with you that I don't necessarily enjoy the way they play because I believe they're capable of more. But ultimately, like you're saying, if you're one of their outside backs, there may be an element of frustration, but you love winning as much as you would love to be a part and have more impact on the game. You want to have success. You can celebrate that, the fact that South Africa, and rightfully so, they did whatever it took to lift the William Webb Ellis Trophy. Same thing, England did whatever they took. So now I go and you go, so how does this look if you're England and if you're Wales, and Wales were that side that probably played in one of the most entertaining games at the Rugby World Cup, their opening match that they had against Fiji, which was a remarkable game, which set up their Rugby World Cup for success. Now, were they disappointing in the quarterfinals? Yes, they were. If you look at their group, they've lost players, retirements, people heading overseas. Warren Gatlin's, he's looking at it and going, well, what have I got going in? A vastly inexperienced side. What does success look like for them? There's still no, I suppose, there's no risk of demotion in the Six Nations. So where do Wales and Italy, we'll get back to England in a moment. Jamie George is the captain of England. But if you look at those two teams in Italy, whose World Cup, well, you would have to say, ended in humiliation against the All Blacks. I mean, that, for Kieran Crowley and that group to concede that much in a game which pretty much was their do or die game, they needed to beat the All Blacks, to not even get close to threatening, they were a shadow of a team that had shown some signs. They've got a new coaching staff. If you're thinking about Wales and Italy, I mean, what does the Six Nations look like for them?
So I think Wales is rebuilding, and I think Gats is one of the smartest coaches around. He will work out a way to find a Welsh style, right? So Wales, I think, probably want to play closer to the philosophy side of my brain, right? So the problem with Italy is they went too far the other way, right? So Wales, I think, will rebuild, and I think Gats will be tactically smart. He'll kick when he needs to kick, but he'll also want to run the ball and put people under pressure. I think the reason why Italy got pumped is they got ahead of themselves and they thought they could run the ball from all over the park, when you can't today. You've got to have the skill set and you've got to have the now. So, they've got to find a happy balance. I think they've got a young team. I think they've got enough firepower to put opposition under pressure. But this new coach who's been pretty successful at Stade Francais, he's Argentinian. He'll be able to speak the language. He understands the Latin mentality. But what he does need to do is find a game plan between what Kieran was trying to do, right, and probably what Nick Mallett did. And if he can find that balance, you've got to create pressure in this game, right? And when you talk about England before, what they did is they just created a shit amount of pressure, which means you've got to give away a penalty, so they shoot the goal. What South Africa did with 7 forwards on the bench is no one was ever tired, so they weren't missing tackles, and that's pressure, right?
Yeah.
So the whole kicking game and the tactical game is about creating enough pressure and then playing to your strengths. Italy got it wrong during the World Cup, and Kirwan did an amazing job up till then, got ahead of themselves. So the question
I think that,
are we going to see a style that suits Italy? Right? I think Gats knows. I think Gats knows how Wales should play and how they should play well. And his goal would be creating a new side that's going to win the Six Nations in 2 to 3 years' time and get to the World Cup ready to fire.
it's interesting you say that about Italy, because they have a rare talent in Capuzzo. And it was almost like we want to play a game plan which gets him involved in the game as much as possible. The trouble with that is the fact that you need the supporting players around him to be able to create that opportunity, and you have to live with sometimes with some of the mistakes that is afforded that mindset. But if you do that against good teams, you're going to get punished. So I agree with you. It's about finding that balance. I mean, Wales's draw, they've got Scotland at home, so that to me is a really interesting one. The fact that Scotland are favoured in that matchup. I'm not convinced about that at all. Scotland will look at their World Cup campaign and go, really, when the pressure came down to it, they had their big game against Ireland, couldn't fire a shot. Didn't really, their last pool game, it was their opportunity to bounce Ireland out of the World Cup, and really they were outclassed. I mean, Scotland's that team that, once again, you're looking for them to make that, but to have that big result. They've got England away, they've got Ireland away. I think that's a tough campaign for them. France at home, and then Italy at home for Wales. I think there's 2 good wins for them, 2 good possibilities with Scotland and with Italy. Both those games at home, but I reckon it's going to be tough for them. So look, I look at this, and if we just then look at the competition, what is it that you would like to see out of it? If you start thinking as a whole and you go, all right, to your point, your left brain and right brain, and how you philosophically, look at the game, and you go, okay, we know how France can play. We know what Ireland have got. Are we going to see rinse and repeat? That's what I would ask you. Do you think we'll see rinse and repeat, these sides and what they do, given the fact that in terms of coaching staff, Italy's the only team that's had the significant change. Obviously, Warren's, been under the seat for over a year now. So when you look at it, what's the Six Nations one mean to you in regards to performance, and what excites you about this competition?
I think the Six Nations is one of the most amazing competitions because it's always competitive. So I would like to see Italy find a style where you go, oh, they're playing like Italians. You spoke about Capuzzo before, right? You can't create a game for him. You've got to let the opposition make mistakes, and then he attacks. They need to be more like France in that respect. So I hope they get competitive. Scotland, for me, is a real dilemma. I don't know. They pull these emotional games out of the hat. If they play at home, they can win. I need to see a bit more consistency and toughness from their forwards. I think they need to find, some backup in their forwards and a bit more grunt, and find a way just to grind things out. I hope there's a couple of upsets. For me, I'm hoping France. I am hoping that the beautiful game, dear Lord, wins. Right? So France wins the game and they win it, and then the other teams look and go, if you want to win it, right? Because let's be careful. South Africa don't play that boring during the championship, right? They save it to the World Cup. England tried to play an expansive game under Ian Jones, and it didn't work, and they got back to some of what you would call their traditional game, World Cup. So we need to be careful that we don't go, to win the World Cup, it's this style of football, but Six Nations, I'm hoping, is going to bring a wee bit more of the philosopher and the artist of our game, not the boring kick the ball because our rules make us play a certain way, Sir Bill.
I feel a statement has been made, which I quite like early on in the year. The reason I'm excited about it is because of the Northern Hemisphere World Cup, because of the attention that was paid to this Rugby World Cup, the anticipation of the Northern Hemisphere. I don't feel as though I've been in a position where I know these teams as well as I do now because
Yeah.
we watched them firsthand. Like, we know these teams now. We know these players. We know why France is good. Sometimes between World Cups you can drift. Whereas now the Six Nations, I've been interested, but now I'm that little bit more engaged on this because one, there's plenty of Kiwis are involved because there's some in all of the teams. Let's be honest. There's a connection there, but also the fact that for so long, Ireland were number one in the world. They made this. They were on such a winning streak. And does a streak start again? Do France start a new streak? Do they all of a sudden start to impact the world rankings? And all of those things.
You have to, mate. Like, World Cup wins don't come by chance. You need to lose. We spoke about the adversity. Why did the All Blacks get to the final? I believe it was because of the adversity that the whole team faced during COVID, during the coaching saga, and they came together with one common goal as a team, right? Fabien Gaultier won't be sleeping at night. Farrell will be a better coach by losing that game and going, how can I win 9 games in a row and then lose that? What happened, right? Once the anger subsides and once the blame subsides, you start looking in the mirror. I think for me, what we want to see is rugby played. We want to see it played to its best ability. And when it's played at its best, then you'll see some fantastic football. And it goes down to the wire in the Six Nations. If we see blowouts, our game's in trouble, right? And I'm calling out Bill early because we need to change some simple things, right? 30 minutes to set the scrum, 30 seconds to set the scrum, 40 seconds throw the ball in, right? We need to think about how we can speed this game up so it becomes more of a spectacle, and that needs to be done sooner rather than later, because there'll be some brilliant games in the Six Nations. I promise you, really exciting. France Ireland first up will probably be one of those thrillers, and then the leaders go back and go, we're fine.
So with that, then let's go round one. Let's just get it out there. Round one, like you said, you've got France Ireland, France at home. Who have you got winning that? France is winning that. England taking on Italy. England taking Italy. England, you've got that. Yep. Last matchup, Wales taking on Scotland. Wales at home.
Wales.
Right. So you've got all of the big England, France, Wales. Okay, then. Who have you got winning? So are you saying with that win, being France, that they will be the winners of the Six Nations in 2024?
No, because I'll lose to Scotland at home.
I knew you'd think about something like that. There's always a twist. There's always something. And I like that because all of a sudden, as you've just said, it's one of those competitions that appears and somehow it comes down to the wire.
France do not like going to Scotland. They hate it.
I don't know why, because I love it. I mean, I love it. Exactly. I love going to Scotland. Edinburgh's a great place to go to. How could you not enjoy going there? Oh, gosh, it's great. So, John Kirwan, look, that's the Six Nations. We've got your champion. But hold on. So, are you saying then, so you told us that France weren't going to win it. Does that mean Ireland are going to win it?
France to win it, Ireland to come second, England to come third, and who cares about the rest?
Mate, in just over 2 weeks' time, we're back on the breakdown. I'm looking forward to that, getting around the seats.
When are we going to talk about Joe Smith going to Australia and actually these rule changes? When are we going to talk about that, mate? Because that's right at the forefront, son.
Oh, okay, I'm going to give you a little bit more time to think about that, to get which brain are we getting going. I'm just to get both sides working on that one, because the other side of it too is we want to talk about Tony Brown going to South Africa as well to coach the Springboks.
I'm reading that.
Your voice, the voice is in the corridor, my friend. The voice is in the corridor. Oh, yeah. There's a high probability. All right, mate. Hey, it's great to catch up. Is that board on behind you? Does that board ever get used?
No, that's
just for looks.
Yeah, that's an old Mick Dooley. That's a collector's item. Yeah, it's a bit like me. Collector's item.
It's a bit like all of us, mate. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait for the action to get started. Bring on 2024. Thanks, mate. Always good to chat.